The day my doctor told me not to go home, the sky outside her office was the color of dishwater, and the rain had started that soft, steady way that makes you think it might never stop. I remember thinking about pot roast and coupons and whether I had enough detergent at home. It was an ordinary Thursday. That was the cruelest part of it. I sat on that crinkly white paper and one of those paper gowns they never tie right in the back. My purse was on the chair, my sweater folded on top of it, my sensible shoes lined up beneath, like they were waiting politely. Dr. Shaw's stethoscope was cold against my chest, but her hands were warm. "Breathe in for me, Mrs. Lewis," she said, "and out." We had done this dance so many times that it felt almost like catching up with a niece. I always asked about her kids. She always told me I should drink more water. We joked about my blood pressure behaving better than some of her younger patients. There was nothing in that room that felt dangerous. When she was done, she pulled her stethoscope out of her ears and hung it around her neck, but she didn't step away right away. She just looked at me for a moment. Her forehead creased in a way I hadn't seen before. "You're doing okay with your medications?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," I said automatically. "I've got them in one of those little day-of-the-week boxes, yellow one. Haven't missed a morning yet." "Good," she murmured. She glanced at the computer screen, then at the closed door, and the stove. No more incidents? I blinked at her. Incidents? She caught herself and shook her head, like she wanted to pluck the word back out of the air. "Never mind. We'll talk in a moment." Before I could ask what she meant, there was a knock, and the nurse leaned in to say they needed Dr. Shaw in another room. She told me she'd be right back to go over my labs. It was nothing unusual on the surface. Doctors get called away all the time. But when she came back, something in her shoulders had changed. The easy bounce was gone. She closed the door quietly, more quietly than before, and rubbed a hand over her face like she was washing it without water. "Everything okay?" I asked. My voice sounded small, even to me. "Yes and no," she said. Then she smiled, the polite professional one, and picked up my chart. "Your blood pressure is fine. Labs look good for someone your age. We'll schedule your 6-month follow-up." I let out a breath I didn't know I had been holding. "Well, that's something." She nodded, then picked up a pad of prescription paper from the counter. Her fingers moved over it like she was writing an order, but her eyes were on me, not the paper. When she stepped closer, she kept talking about cholesterol and sodium like nothing was wrong. "If you go up front, they'll print your after-visit summary," she said in her normal voice. Then, very quickly, her hand brushed mine and I felt the stiff edge of folded paper press into my palm. And, "Margaret." "Yes?" "Don't forget your umbrella," she said. But her eyes said something else entirely. I slid off the exam table, the paper gown crackling, feeling that little folded square growing heavier and heavier in my hand. By the time I had put on my jeans and my sweater and my shoes, my palm was damp around it. I checked out at the front desk like I always did, smiled at the receptionist, made my next appointment. My voice sounded normal. My heart did not. The hallway smelled of disinfectant and cheap coffee. My shoes squeaked on the shiny floor. I nodded to a young mother wrangling a toddler, stepped into the elevator with a man in a construction jacket, watched the doors slide shut. Only then, with the elevator humming and my ears full of that quiet metal sound, did I open my hand. On the prescription slip, in Dr. Shaw's quick slanted handwriting, were 4 words: "Don't go home tonight." For a second, I thought I'd read it wrong. My eyes blurred and I blinked them clear. The words stayed the same. The ground seemed to tilt. I reached back blindly and pressed my shoulders against the cool elevator wall. I tried to breathe the way she told me, slow in, slow out. But my chest felt tight, like someone had tied a belt around it. A gas leak, I thought. Maybe she saw something in my labs. Maybe there'd been a break-in on my street. Maybe. And then another thought slid in, dark and slick and unwelcome. What did my children tell her? The elevator doors opened with a soft ding. The man in the construction jacket stepped out. I stayed where I was for a beat too long, then forced myself to move. Past the gift shop, past the Christmas tree they hadn't taken down yet, even though it was January, out into the parking lot where the rain made everything look softer and meaner at the same time. I sat in my car with the engine off, listening to the rain drum on the roof. My little blue house was glowing on my phone's lock screen, the photo Leela had taken last spring when the azaleas were blooming. My home, my kitchen, my bed, my husband's sweater still hanging in the closet. My thumb hovered over Daniel's name first. My son, the responsible one. I hit dial before I could talk myself out of it. "Hey, Mom," he answered, too bright. "You done already?"
I am, I said. I tried to keep my voice level. Doctor's running a little behind today. I might be, 40 minutes late getting home. Just wanted you to know. There was a beat of empty air. Getting home from where? From the clinic, I reminded him. From my checkup. I told you last week. Oh, right, yeah. Paper rustled on his end. No worries. Everything okay? I listened hard. Was that worry, nerves, annoyance? His tone was so casual, it felt almost practiced. Everything seems fine, I said. Dr. Shah'll go over it all next time. Just wanted to let you know. Sure thing, Mom. Drive safe, he said. Love you. Love you too. I hung up and sat perfectly still for a moment, the phone warm in my hand. Then I scrolled to Denise, my middle child, my peacemaker who had started to sound more like a scared teenager again lately. Hey, Mom, I can't really talk. I'm on my break. I won't keep you, I said. Just doctor appointment ran late, that's all. I'm fine. Okay, quickly, good. That's good. Listen, if you're tired, you should just rest tonight, okay? Don't overdo it. Something in the way she said tonight made the hairs on my arms rise. I'll keep that in mind, I said softly. Love you. Love you too. But it came out like a sigh of relief more than affection. I didn't start the car. I held that prescription slip in my hand until the ink smudged a little under my thumb. Then I folded it tighter, tucked it into my wallet, and pulled out onto the road. But I didn't turn toward my neighborhood. I turned toward the freeway. The motel I chose was the kind you pick when you're tired, not when you're hiding. Beige walls, buzzing neon vacancy sign, a bored clerk who didn't look up when I paid in cash. The room smelled faintly of old air freshener and something fried. I sat on the floral bedspread with my purse still on my shoulder and my coat still on, my phone face up beside me. For a while, I watched the muted television, some game show with people clapping too hard. The words, "Don't go home tonight," sat behind my eyes like a headache. I must have dozed because the next thing I knew, my phone buzzed against my leg. I picked it up, expecting a call. It was a text from Leela. "Grandma, I'm so sorry." My stomach dropped. Before I could even answer, another bubble appeared. "I didn't mean to send this to you, but maybe I should. Don't tell Mom." A screenshot followed. White background, little gray text bubbles, names at the top. Daniel, Kyla, Denise, intake coordinator, Jennifer. The group chat header said, "Mom, care plan." The first line I read was from Kyla. "Jennifer, We'll all be at Mom's by 7. She doesn't know you're coming. Just remember what we discussed if she gets confused or resistant. My vision tunneled. My ears went hot. Somewhere in that cheap motel room, the muted TV kept flashing colors I didn't see. That was the night I began to find out what my family had planned for me. I suppose I should tell you who I am before I tell you how close I came to being locked away like an old suitcase. My name is Margaret Lewis, though most people call me Maggie. I was 63 that year, with a me that complained in the mornings and a house I had paid off one quiet paycheck at a time. I lived in a yellow one-story on a dead-end street just outside the city, the kind of street where bikes get left on lawns and everybody pretends not to see when someone's marriage is going bad. My kitchen was my favorite place in the world. Sunny in the mornings, with white cabinets I painted myself, and a ceramic rooster cookie jar Leo and I bought at a yard sale 30 years ago. Leo died 5 years before all this. One crisp October afternoon, his heart just decided it had done enough for one lifetime. I went from making his coffee at 6 a.m. to picking out a casket by 4. Daniel flew in from his conference in Chicago, tie still around his neck. Denise came straight from a double shift at the hospital in wrinkled scrubs. At the time, I thought God had blessed me with a take-charge son. Daniel walked into the funeral home with that brisk, grave expression and told the director, "My mother just lost her husband. I'll handle the paperwork." He sat beside me at the kitchen table with stacks of forms and his laptop, explaining things about pensions and life insurance and beneficiary designations that sounded like foreign language. "Don't worry about any of this, Mom. That's what you got me for. Just sign where I put the sticky notes." So I did. My hand shook sometimes, but I signed. I was too busy trying to remember how to sleep alone in that bed, how to cook for one, how to breathe around the hole Leo left. Back then, when people at church asked me how I was managing, I'd smile and say, "I don't know what I'd do without my Danny. He's so good with money." After a while, it just became the way things were. Daniel would stop by with his laptop, sit at my table, and say things like, "I moved some funds around, Mom, got you a better interest rate," or "I set up your online banking for you. I'll send you the app."
I never liked that app. It made me feel like I was holding something fragile and expensive that could shatter if I pressed the wrong button. So over time, I let him press the buttons. Denise was different. My middle child, my soft-hearted girl. She had Leela when she was barely more than a girl herself. Got left with the baby and the bills when her ex-husband ran off to Texas. She worked nights as a nurse, slept in pieces during the day, and brought her laundry to my house every Sunday. She'd pull into my driveway in that old Honda with a trunk full of scrubs and a tired smile. Leela would jump out with her backpack and a bag of tangled clothes. "Grandma!" she'd yelled, running to hug me. She always smelled like whatever shampoo was on sale that week and the faintest hint of hospital. Those Sundays kept me alive. I'd make lasagna or roast chicken, and the house would fill up with the smell of garlic and dryer sheets. The sink would overflow with dishes, the TV would play some movie we'd all seen a dozen times. When Daniel and his wife, Kyla, started coming on Sundays too, I thought it was a blessing. More chairs around the table, more hands to help with dishes, more laughter. At first, it was like that. Daniel at the head of the table, telling stories about this crazy client or that market swing. Kyla scrolling on her phone, showing us pictures of influencers' kitchens, saying, "Can you imagine having that pantry?" But slowly, the conversation shifted. One Sunday, my phone buzzed in my apron pocket while I was stirring sauce. I pulled it out, squinted at the screen, and frowned. "What's wrong?" Daniel asked from his seat at the table. "I don't know how to close this. The bank sent me some kind of alert." Daniel laughed, loud enough that even the grandkids looked up. Mom and her boomer panic. You'd think a push notification was a bomb. The kids giggled. Denise winced. Kyla smiled without looking up. "I'm learning," I said, forcing a smile. Slowly. Kyla started helping in other ways.
She'd come over early on Sundays and drift into my pantry without asking, pulling out jars and boxes. "Oh my God, Maggie," she'd exclaim, laughing. "You know you have 3 different jars of oregano? This is like hoarder-level weird." She'd start rearranging things, putting labels on shelves, snapping little videos on her phone. "It's just for my followers. They love a good pantry makeover. You'll be internet famous." I didn't want to be internet famous. I wanted to be allowed to know where my own sugar was. Little things kept piling up. One afternoon, I was looking for my car keys in my purse and couldn't find them, no matter how many times I reached back in. "I could have sworn," I muttered to myself. Daniel walked in, twirling the keys around his finger. "Looking for these?" he grinned. Relief flooded me. "Where on earth?" "You left them in the front door again." Then, to Kyla, "See, this is why I worry." "I only did that once." "Twice, actually," he said lightly. "It's okay. That's what I'm here for." Denise still came with laundry and tight hugs, but even she started sending me articles on Facebook about seniors being scammed, seniors falling, seniors wandering away from home. "This stuff scares me for you, Mom," she'd text with a worried emoji. The first time I heard the phrase memory care in my kitchen, Kyla was stirring gravy. Steam curled around her face like a halo. "You know, Maggie, some of my followers' parents are moving into these amazing assisted living communities. They've got memory care on the same campus. It's so much safer when you get older." She hesitated just half a second before the word older, like she was picking it out of a lineup. I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. "Well, I'm still remembering my own name and address for now." Something inside me pulled tight that day, like a drawstring. Sunday dinners began to feel less like family and more like a meeting where I was the agenda item. "Have you thought more about what happens if you can't manage the house, Mom?" Daniel would ask between bites of salad. "Big yards are dangerous when you get frail," Kyla would add. "I saw this TikTok about." "Daniel just wants to make sure you're protected," Denise would say, eyes on her plate. Protected. Such a nice word for caged. The night that really settled in my bones, I was sitting at my own kitchen table with my cooling mug of tea while everyone else talked around me. Plans, responsibilities, paperwork. They were talking about my future as if I had already stepped out of the room. "We could sell the house now while the market's high," Daniel was saying. "Put the money somewhere it can actually grow." "But she said she wants to die in that house," Denise whispered. "She says a lot of things," Kyla murmured, tapping on her phone. "She also says she'd never use a smartphone, and look at her now." No one asked me what I wanted. I sat there, my hands wrapped around my mug, watching Daniel's hand resting on a manila folder beside his plate. The label, written in his neat accountant handwriting, was facing me. Mom Planning. I stared at that label until the letters might as well have been engraved on my kitchen table. That was before the Thursday at the clinic, before the note, before I saw the words, "Don't go home tonight," in my doctor's handwriting. But afterwards, when I sat on that motel bed with the screenshot from Leela open in front of me, every small moment snapped into place like beads on a string. The chat bubbles blurred together at first. I wiped my eyes and made myself read each line. "Daniel, we need to make this look like a crisis or they'll never move fast enough." "Kyla, if she acts confused or paranoid, that helps our case, right, Jennifer?" "Yes, if there's evidence she's a danger to herself, we'll document everything from tonight." "Denise, are you sure this is the only way? I don't want her to hate us." "Daniel, she'll be safer, and once she's settled, it'll be easier for everyone. We can't keep waiting for her to slip." "Kyla again. Once she's in the facility, we can handle everything. House, accounts, all of it. This is the safest way. She'll thank us later." My hands shook so hard I almost dropped the phone. The cheap painting of a sailboat on the motel wall seemed to tilt with the room. "Grandma, I'm so sorry. I wasn't supposed to see this. Uncle added me by mistake. Mom told him to remove me. I screenshotted before they did. My fingers felt thick as I typed back. Thank you for sending it, baby. Are you safe? Her reply came fast. Yes, I'm at home. They think I'm in my room. Please don't go home. They said if you act out, they can do something called a hold. A hold? Like you put on a package at the post office? My heart broke and hardened at the same time. For a long moment, I just sat there on the edge of that lumpy motel bed with my feet not quite reaching the floor, the hum of the old air conditioner filling the silence. I thought about my rooster cookie jar, my yellow cabinets, Leo's sweater, the azaleas in front of the little blue house on my phone screen. I thought about my son's hand on that mom planning folder, Kyla's voice saying she'll thank us later, Denise whispering she didn't want me to hate them. Something behind my ribs shifted. It wasn't a snap, exactly, more like a slow, steady turn of a key. I looked at the screenshot one more time, the neat little digital proof of their plan, and I felt a new version of myself step forward inside my skin, one that still loved her children, but loved her own life more. I set the phone down carefully on the nightstand beside the motel Bible and the plastic lamp. My voice, when I finally heard it in that empty room, surprised me. It was steady. No, I whispered into the humming air, you will not bury me alive. Lying there in that stiff motel bed with the hum of the old air conditioner and the smell of someone else's cigarettes baked into the drapes, I realized my life had just split into a before and an after. Before that note, after that screenshot. And as I stared at the ceiling, another sound floated back to me. Not the TV, not the rain on the roof, Dr. Shaw's voice. The part of the day I hadn't told you yet. Because before I ended up in that motel clutching my phone, there was a moment in that clinic when she stopped just being my doctor and quietly became something closer to a guardian. When I first read those 4 words in the elevator, "Don't go home tonight," I told you how the world tilted. What I didn't say was what happened next. I had almost reached the sliding glass doors of the lobby, my mind spinning with gas leaks and break-ins and all the things that didn't quite fit, when I remembered my umbrella. It was one of those cheap floral ones Leo bought me at a drugstore years ago. I left it hanging on the hook in the exam room. Turning back for that umbrella probably saved me. I walked back through the sliding glass doors, trying to look casual like any forgetful older woman doubling back for something. The receptionist glanced up, didn't ask questions. I rode the elevator back up, that little square of paper in my fists like a stone. The exam room was empty when I pushed the door open. My umbrella was still there, drooping from the hook. I grabbed it, then hesitated, my hand on the cold metal of the handle. I could have just gone home, pretended I never saw the note, decided it was a mistake. Instead, I stepped back into the hallway and caught sight of Dr. Shaw at the nurse's station, looking at a chart. There was something in the way she was standing. Too still. Too tight. "Doctor," I called softly. She turned, and when she saw me, her face shifted in the space of a heartbeat, from professional calm to a kind of relief. "Miss Lewis," she said, walking toward me. "Did you forget something?" I held up the umbrella. "This," and my fingers curled around the folded paper. "I think we need to talk about this." Her eyes flicked down to my hand, then over my shoulder toward the nurse and the open hallway. She nodded once, briskly. "Come with me," she said.
She led me down a short hallway I'd never noticed before to a little consultation room. It had a round table, 2 chairs, and a fake plant in the corner. No exam table, no paper, no windows, just 4 beige walls and the buzzing of the fluorescent lights.
When she closed the door, she let out a breath like she'd been holding it for hours. "Sit, please," she said. I sat. My knees suddenly felt much older than 63. I unfolded the paper and smoothed it on the table between us. The words looked even harsher under the bright light. "Don't go home tonight," I read aloud. My voice trembled on the last word. "What does this mean, Dr. Shaw?" She pulled out the other chair and sat down, folding her hands. For a moment, she just looked at me, studying my face like it was a chart she needed to read perfectly. "First," she said quietly, "I want you to hear this clearly. I do not think you are confused. I do not think you are incapable of understanding what I'm about to say." I swallowed. "Okay." "And second," she added, "nothing I'm going to tell you is meant to frighten you. It is meant to give you time. Do you understand?" I nodded, even though my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. She took a breath. "Your son and daughter-in-law came to see me last week." My fingers tightened around the edge of the table. "Daniel and Kyla?" She nodded. "They said they were very worried about you." Worried. Such a nice little word. It sat in the room like a polite stranger. "What did they say?" I asked. Her voice stayed calm, but I could see the anger in the line of her jaw. "They told me you've left the stove 3 times in the last month, that she wandered outside in your nightgown at 2 in the morning and couldn't remember why, that you've called them crying several times and then had no memory of those calls the next day." I stared at her. For a second, I wondered if I had stepped into someone else's story. "That's not true," I said slowly. "I left a burner on once. I caught it myself and turned it off. I went outside at 11 one night because a cat knocked over the trash can, and I have cried on the phone with my daughter, yes, but I remember every word I said." She nodded. "I know." Shame and fury rose in me at the same time, hot and bitter. My cheeks burned. I could hear Kyla's voice in my head saying "boomer panic," laughing about my oregano jars, stirring gravy like she owned my kitchen. "They asked me," Dr. Shaw went on, "if I would be willing, when the time came, to provide documentation that you were not safe living alone, that you might need guardianship. A safe placement," was the phrase they used. "Guardianship?" I repeated. The word tasted metallic. "Like I'm a child?" "Like you're legally incompetent, unable to manage your own affairs." I looked down at my hands. They weren't as smooth as they once were. The veins stood out more. But they'd raised those children. They'd packed lunches and washed uniforms and written checks that kept a roof over our heads even when there was more month than money. "Why would they do that?" I whispered, though I already knew the answer. She hesitated. "Sometimes families are afraid of what could happen. Sometimes they are motivated by other things. Finances, control. It can be both." I thought of Daniel's hands on that mom planning folder, of Kyla's eyes lighting up when she talked about open concept kitchens and investment opportunities. "She told them," Dr. Shaw continued, "that I would not sign anything without a proper evaluation, that from what I'd seen, you were organized, oriented, and managing your own care well." "And?" I asked. Her mouth tightened. "Yesterday, one of our intake coordinators accidentally left a file open at the nurse's station. I heard your name. I overheard just enough of a phone call to understand that your family was pushing for an emergency home visit, a social worker, possibly a crisis team. They used language that, if documented a certain way, could support an emergency psychiatric hold." The room swam for a moment. A hold? I repeated. She nodded. If someone appears confused, paranoid, or a danger to themselves, there are mechanisms to keep them in a hospital for evaluation without their consent. Sometimes that's appropriate and life-saving. Sometimes, she met my eyes, sometimes it is misused. My throat felt dry. So that's why you wrote this. I touched the note. Yes, she said. I don't have proof of anything yet. I can't stop them from requesting a visit. But I can tell you this. I do not want you walking into a situation tonight where there are 3 professionals in your living room and your own children telling them you've lost touch with reality. Part of me wanted to argue, to say, my children would never, but the words stuck in my chest like stones. What should I do? I asked. For tonight, she said, don't go home. Stay with a friend, a hotel, anywhere but your address. And after tonight, she hesitated again. Document everything, she said. Names, dates, what's said to you. I will schedule a formal cognitive assessment as soon as possible, so there's something in your file besides their stories. I didn't feel like a patient anymore. I felt like a witness being prepped for the stand. I folded the note again more carefully this time, slipped it back into my wallet.
Thank you, I said. My voice cracked on the second word. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You are not crazy, she said quietly. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Those words carried me out of the clinic, through the rain, into my car, and eventually to that motel on the side of the freeway. Hours later, after the game show reruns and the greasy smell from the takeout place next door had seeped under the door, after I had read Leela's messages and stared at that group chat until my eyes hurt, they were still there. You are not crazy. What my children were planning was. The cheap mattress creaked when I finally lay back, but inside, something had gone very still, like a lake after a storm. No, I whispered into that humming air, you will not bury me alive. Morning came in through a grimy strip of window, thin and gray. I hadn't really slept. My body had rested some, but my mind had spent the night replaying every small moment of the past few months, reshelving them under a new label: evidence. The motel coffee tasted like burnt cardboard, but I drank it anyway. My hands didn't shake when I picked up my car keys. On the drive back toward my neighborhood, the world looked almost normal. School buses, joggers, people in scrubs heading to the early shift. I drove like a ghost among them, my little blue car sliding through intersections I knew by heart. When I turned onto my street, my foot tightened on the brake. Daniel's SUV was already in my driveway, parked in my usual spot. Beside it, a white sedan with the clinic logo on the side. Not Dr. Shah's clinic, a different one, the kind of generic logo you see on pamphlets in emergency rooms. I didn't need binoculars to know what that meant. I didn't stop. I kept driving, slow and smooth, like any neighbor heading to the cul-de-sac to turn around. My house was on the corner, so it was easy enough. As I passed, I caught a glimpse through the front window. 3 figures standing in my living room. One woman in a blazer with a clipboard, a man in a polo shirt, and my son, gesturing with his hands like he was explaining something complicated, explaining me. My heart pounded, but my hands stayed steady on the wheel. I drove on, turned at the end of the street, and kept going until I reached the small park 2 blocks away. I pulled into the empty lot and turned off the engine. The quiet roared in my ears. For a minute, I just sat there staring at the playground. The swings hung still. The slide was wet from last night's rain. A few birds hopped in the wet grass.
I could go home, I thought. Walk in and let them tell their story, try to act normal, hope the woman with the clipboard believed me. Or I could listen to the one person who had looked me in the eye and said, "You are not crazy." I took out my phone and called Denise. She answered on the second ring, her voice tight. "Mom, where are you? Daniel." My phone died last night," I lied calmly. "You know these old batteries. I just got it back on." Silence. Then, "We were worried, Mom. The professionals came by to check on you." "I saw." I said, "Sweetheart, why didn't you come check on me yourself?" Her breath hitched. "Daniel said we needed to do it the right way, that if this went through the system, you'd be safer. He said if we warned you, you might run." I let that sit for a second. "Do I sound like I'm running?" "I don't know what you're doing," she whispered. It sounded like she might be in a stairwell at the hospital again, hiding from other ears. "All I know is they're going to say you're missing, that it proves you're not safe." "Thank you for telling me," I said softly. "I'll be in touch." "Mom!" But I'd already ended the call. My hands were starting to tremble now, so I placed them palms down on my thighs and pressed. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Leela. "They're mad you weren't there." Then another. "Uncle D kept saying, 'This is exactly what I mean.'" That meant there would be notes, reports, someone's version of me on paper that said missing, non-compliant, maybe even delusional. You can't fight a story like that with feelings. You need your own paper. I didn't know everything yet, but I knew this. If my son was going to turn my life into a file, then I had to build my own. Dr. Shah answered on the first ring when I called. "Miss Lewis?" I said. "They came to my house, just like you thought. A team. I drove by." She swore softly under her breath, then caught herself. "I'm sorry. Are you safe right now?" "I'm in my car at the park. I don't plan on going home until they're gone." "Good," she said. "Listen to me. When you do go home, I want you to write down everything you notice. If anything is out of place, any papers disturbed, write it down. Date it, time it. For now, I want to move up that cognitive assessment." "Will that help?" I asked. "Yes," she said firmly. "If anyone tries to say you're incompetent, we need something objective in your chart that says otherwise. I'm also going to make a note about the visit you just described. Do you feel up to coming back in tomorrow?" I looked at the playground, the swings, the wet slide. A few birds hopped in the wet grass. I said, "Yes, I do."
After we hung up, I leaned my forehead against the steering wheel for a moment. The cool leather felt good against my skin. I thought about just driving away. New city, new name, new life. It was a ridiculous thought, but it did pass through my mind like a shadow. Then I remembered Leo's grave, 10 minutes from my house. The azaleas I planted every year. The book club at the library. The neighbor who waved when I took the trash out. This was my life, my street, my kitchen. I was not the one who needed to disappear. By late afternoon, the SUV and the white sedan were gone. My little blue house sat there like it always had, pretending nothing had happened. The air smelled like wet pavement and someone grilling down the block. I let myself in and stood in the entryway, listening. The house has its own set of sounds. The hum of the fridge, the tick of the hallway clock, the faint rush of the heater. All of that was still there. But there were new notes in the song. The shoes scattered by the door had been nudged aside. My umbrella, my silly floral umbrella, had been moved from its hook and leaned against the wall. In the living room, the Afghan on the back of the couch was folded differently. My throw pillow was on the floor. I walked down the hallway to my bedroom.
The door to my small office was ajar. I always close it. Always. Inside, my file cabinet stood where it always stood, metal and ordinary. The little key I kept in my jewelry box still slid into the lock and turned. But the files inside, my folders had been rearranged. Not much, just enough that I knew someone else's fingers had been in my life. Insurance statements facing the wrong way, a bank statement out of chronological order, my handwritten budget flipped upside down. I stood there with the drawer open and felt something in me go cold and sharp. I closed the drawer gently, locked it, pulled the key out. Then I walked straight to the kitchen, opened the junk drawer, and pulled out a small spiral notebook and a pen. On the first page, in the neat teacher handwriting that never quite left me after years at the school office, I wrote the date, the time. Then I wrote, returned home. Daniel's SUV, an unknown clinic car, had been in driveway earlier. Signs of entry. Office door ajar. Files disturbed. No note left. The words looked small on the page, but they were mine, my story, my way. I didn't know it that night, sitting at my own kitchen table with that notebook open and my tea growing cold, but that was the first page of the record that would one day sit on Mr. Alvarez's polished desk. At the time, all I knew was this. My son had brought strangers into my house without my consent, and they had begun writing their version of my life. I was going to write mine back. It didn't get better after that. It got worse, in small, slow ways. That's the thing no one tells you about betrayal. It doesn't always come with shouting and slammed doors. Sometimes it comes with checklists and concerns. Daniel started dropping by more often, always with that tight smile. "Just checking in, Mom," he'd say, glancing around the kitchen, "seeing how you're doing." He'd open my fridge and stand there a little too long, making mental notes. "You've got a lot of leftovers," he'd comment. "Are you remembering to eat fresh stuff?" Or he'd glance at the calendar on the wall. "You know, today is Thursday, right?" I'd look him right in the eye and say, "Yes, Daniel, I know it's Thursday." He'd chuckle, like it was a joke, but I could feel the invisible pen in his hand adding another line to whatever file he was building. Sometimes he'd call me on speakerphone while he was in the car with Denise, his voice loud and cheery. "Hey, Mom, what are you up to?" Just reading," I'd say. "Not out driving again, right?" "No," I'd answer. "I'm on the couch with my book." "That's good. Mom's been getting turned around in the neighborhood lately," he'd add to Denise, just loud enough so I could hear. "I told you about that, right?" I'd grip the phone tighter, my heart thumping. I had gotten turned around once, months ago, when they changed the detour signs to fix a water main. I'd taken one wrong turn, circled the block, and found my way just fine. But in his mouth, that one wrong turn became a pattern. Kyla's visits were more obvious. She started bringing stacks of glossy brochures and spreading them across my kitchen table like we were planning a vacation. "Look at this one," she'd tap a photo of a spotless, sunlit building. "They've got pools, movie nights, a salon on site. It's like a cruise you never have to get off." I'd look at the smiling gray-haired couples in matching cardigans and feel my skin crawl. "I like my house," I would say quietly. "Of course you do," she'd reply, her tone patient, like she was talking to a stubborn child. "But big houses and stairs and bathtubs get dangerous when you get older. You don't want to fall and have no one find you for days, do you?" There it was, the painted picture of me lying alone on my bathroom tile.
I could almost feel the cold of it.
I have a medical alert bracelet, I'd remind her, and neighbors. She'd smile, soft and condescending. Influencers my age would kill for the kind of setup you could have, Maggie, she'd say. You sell this house while the market's good, move into one of these communities, let the professionals handle everything. It's a win-win. A win-win for whom? I'd ask, but only in my head. Out loud, I'd stay quiet and take another brochure, and later, when she left, I'd write down what she'd said in my notebook. Denise tried to stand in the middle, like she always did, but it's hard to balance on a knife's edge without getting cut. One evening, she came over alone, without Lila or laundry. She sat at my kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a mug of tea she wasn't drinking. Daniel showed me some things, she said. What things? I asked. Your bills, she said. How many you're juggling, the house insurance, the taxes. He said you've been forgetting to pay on time, that the bank called him. I felt my face get hot. The bank called because he logged into my account from his office and flagged a security check, I said, and I haven't missed a payment in years. He says he's worried, Mom, she said. Her eyes were tired. He says if we don't do something now, the state might have to later. He says none of us are in a position to take you in if something happens. There it was again. Something happens. They all kept talking about this shadow as if it were already standing in the doorway. What do you think, Denise? I asked. She looked down into her mug. I think I can't afford to lose his help with Lila's college fund, she whispered. He told me if I don't support this, he can't be responsible for that money anymore. So there it was, the rope he was pulling with. I don't want to hurt you, she said. A tear fell into her tea. Or Mom. I don't know how to keep everyone safe. I reached across the table and took her hand. Her fingers were cold. The difference between your brother and I said gently, is that I don't think I need to put someone in a locked building to feel safe. She flinched. It's not like that, she said quickly. It's not a prison. They have gardens, activities. He says you'll make friends. Friends who also had their keys taken away, I murmured. She didn't answer. Bills started going missing. At first, I thought I was misplacing them. Then one day, my mail was on the floor of the front hall, just inside the door, even though I always sorted at the kitchen table. I found a property tax notice under the armchair cushion, a utility bill behind the toaster. When the bank called about an unusual login attempt on my online account, the representative's voice was polite but firm. Did you try to sign in from a new device today, Mrs. Lewis? No, I said, my heart climbing into my throat. Well, we blocked the attempt. Your son, Daniel, is listed as someone who can discuss your account. He called a few minutes ago to ask about it. He said he was helping you with your finances. I thanked her, hung up, and stared at the phone. When I asked Daniel about it later on Sunday dinner, he shrugged. I was just trying to check on something for you, Mom. You always say you hate logging in. You didn't ask, I replied. He spread his hands. Do I need permission to take care of my own mother? Kyla sighed dramatically. You're lucky to have a son who cares this much, Maggie. Some people's parents end up on those news stories because nobody bothered to help them until it was too late. Is that what you're afraid of? A news story. She smiled that bright, empty smile and changed the subject. My position in my own life was shrinking. Daniel cut down the money he transferred each month to help me budget. It was my own money from accounts he technically managed, but he talked about it like an allowance. We need to get you used to living on less, he said. Places like Oakwood don't come cheap. You'll need to contribute, you know. Places like Oakwood. One of the brochures, I'd put it in the recycling bin twice.
It kept turning up on my table. Kyla scolded me for walking to the corner store when it got dark at 5. "If you fall, who will find you?" she demanded. "The clerk," I said dryly, "when I don't show up for my weekly scratch-off ticket." She didn't laugh. Denise came over in tears one night and asked if I'd just agreed to a simple evaluation with a social worker to prove them wrong. Once they see you're fine, they'll back off. I looked at her and saw the little girl who used to crawl into my bed after a nightmare, clutching her stuffed rabbit. I also saw the woman who had almost helped to lure me into an ambush in my own living room. "I'm not going to walk into a trap to make your brother feel better," I said gently. "I love you, but no." After she left, I opened my notebook again. Date, time. Denise asks me to agree to evaluation, said it would prove them wrong. I felt like a suspect, not a mother. By then, the notebook already had several pages filled. Names, quotes, little arrows connecting one moment to another. It made me feel less crazy to see it all in ink instead of just in my head.
Lila noticed it one afternoon when she stopped by after school. "What's that?" she asked. "Just something I'm working on," I said, closing it halfway. Her eyes were too sharp to be fooled. "Grandma," she said quietly, "I'm sorry I sent that screenshot, but I'm not sorry." "I know," I said. "I heard Mom and Uncle Danny talking about grounds and non-compliance like you were some kind of case," she said. "You're not a case. You're my grandmother." Her eyes were shiny with tears. She was too stubborn to let fall. "Come here," I said, opening my arms. She hugged me, and for a moment I could breathe again. That night, after I wrote down a few more lines in my notebook, I realized ink and paper weren't going to be enough. People like my son lived in documents, contracts, court forms, bank statements. If he was going to use paper against me, I needed better paper on my side. Which is why, a few days later, I found myself sitting in a clinic room again, holding a pencil and trying not to overthink how I was drawing the hands on a clock. The cognitive assessment wasn't what I expected. No big brain machines, no wires, just a kind-faced woman with a clipboard, asking me to remember a list of words, copy a pattern, name as many animals as I could in 1 minute. I felt ridiculous. I also felt like my entire future hung on whether I remembered the word table 10 minutes later. "Take your time," the woman said. "That's what I'm trying to hang on to. Time." When the test was done, she gave me a small smile. "You did very well, Mrs. Lewis." I didn't let myself relax until I was back in Dr. Shaw's office and she had the results in her hands. She flipped through the pages, her eyes scanning the numbers and notes. Then she looked up at me and smiled with genuine relief. "You scored solidly normal for your age. Better than normal in some areas." I let out a breath that came out shaky. "So I'm not losing my mind?" "Not according to this," she said. She turned the paper around so I could see the lines she'd highlighted. "I am documenting here that in my medical opinion, you are currently competent to manage your own affairs." The word competent shouldn't have to sound like a victory, but it did. She printed several copies for me. The paper was warm when she handed it over. It felt like armor. "Keep one somewhere safe at home, give one to someone you trust outside your family, and we'll keep this in your chart." As I slid the papers into a manila envelope, I heard raised voices at the nurse's station. My name floated through the door like a draft. "I'm just saying, the notes you put in here don't match what the family reported. I had to flag the file." "Talk to Dr. Shah. She's the primary." I sat very still,
listening to the rustle of paper and the beep of monitors. Somewhere in some computer system, there were now two versions of me, the one my children described and the one my doctor saw. When I got home that evening, Lila came by to borrow a textbook. She shut the door to my bedroom behind her and pulled out her phone. Her hands were trembling. "She needs you to listen to this." She opened her voice memos and tapped one. Daniel's voice filled the room, clearer than I'd ever heard it. "Look, Jennifer, I know the tests sometimes don't show the real picture. Honestly, she's fine some days. But if we wait for her to actually decline, we'll never be able to do this. The house will be a nightmare to deal with if she dies without us on everything." My heart turned to ice. On the recording, the woman, intake coordinator Jennifer, said something about criteria and documentation. Daniel cut in, "I just want to make sure if my mom tries to game the test, we can still move forward. She's very good at performing. She used to work in the school office. She knows how to talk to people." I sat down heavily on the edge of my bed. "Where did you get this?" I asked. "Mom had him on speaker while she was folding laundry. She didn't realize I was in the hallway. I hit record because, I don't know, it felt wrong. I emailed it to myself in case they took my phone." "You are your grandmother's girl," I whispered, reaching out to squeeze her hand. We listened to the rest. Every word scraped something inside me raw, but it was also strangely cleansing. There it was. Proof. Not just what they were doing, but that they knew exactly what they were doing. When the recording ended, the room felt very quiet. I could hear the shrubs brushing against the side of the house outside. "So now you have three things," Lila said softly. "That note, the test results, this." "And you," I said. Her face crumpled for a second. "I'll testify," she blurted, "even if Mom gets mad. I don't care. I'm not letting them lock you up somewhere." It was one thing to feel cornered and helpless. It was another to realize I had more power than they knew.
I had my doctor's words on paper. I had my own words in a notebook. I had my granddaughter's recording in the cloud. That night, when I lay in bed staring at the shadows on my ceiling, the fear was still there, but it wasn't the only thing. Underneath it, something solid had settled, a new strength. For the first time, I understood I wasn't just protecting a building or my bank account. I was defending my right to still be a person in my own story. The next step was figuring out how to do it in a world that listens to signatures more than to mothers. I didn't find the answer in a book or on the internet. I found it at my neighbor's kitchen table over a cup of instant coffee. Mrs. Washington lived 2 doors down, retired postal worker, sharp as a tack. She brought me casseroles when Leo died and gossip when the world was too quiet. One afternoon, I knocked on her door with a Tupperware of leftover lasagna as an excuse. "Margaret, you look like you've seen a haint," she said when she opened the door. "Come in here and sit down." Her kitchen smelled like fried chicken and lemon cleaner. Her table was covered in circulars and a half-finished crossword puzzle. I don't know exactly when my voice started shaking. Maybe somewhere around the part where I said guardianship and facility. She listened without interrupting, her dark eyes thoughtful. When I finished, she sat back and let out a long breath. "Baby," she said, and there was so much pity and anger in that one word that my eyes filled again. These children of ours, some of them forget what we had to be to get them grown. "I don't want to believe my own son would do this," I whispered. Believe your evidence, she said calmly. You got a doctor, you got that recording, you got your own good sense. You don't need faith on top of all that. She got up and went to a drawer by the stove, the one where she kept coupons and rubber bands and memorial cards from old church friends. She pulled out a business card and set it in front of me. Call this man, she said. He helped my brother when his kids tried to get at his house after his stroke. Elder law, they call it. Nice voice, teeth like a wolf. The card was thick and cream-colored. Raul Alvarez, attorney at law. Under his name, in smaller letters, were the words estate planning, guardianship, elder law. I took a picture of it before I even slipped it into my purse. I don't want to go to war with my family, I said. She chuckled without humor. Honey, they already declared it, she said. You just deciding whether to show up to the battlefield naked or with some armor on. I went home and stared at that business card for a long time. The next morning, I called. His office was in an older building downtown, the kind with squeaky elevators and brass mail slots on every door. The waiting room had mismatched chairs and a pot of coffee that had seen better days. When Mr. Alvarez came out to get me, he was shorter than I expected, with silver at his temples and kind eyes behind square glasses. Miss Lewis, he said. Mrs., I corrected automatically. But you can call me Maggie. He smiled. Then you should call me Raul, he said. Come on back. His office was neat, but not fancy. Shelves full of thick law books, a framed certificate on the wall, and a photo of two teenagers in graduation gowns on his desk. So, he said, once we'd sat down, tell me what brings you in. I opened my purse and started laying my life out on his desk. First, the notebook, pages of dates and quotes and little arrows. Then Dr. Shaw's cognitive assessment with the word competent underlined in yellow. Then my phone with Leela's recording queued up. He didn't interrupt much, just asked short questions now and then. When was this? Who else was present? Do you have any copies of old powers of attorney? When I finished, he sat back and let out a long whistle. People usually come to me after they've signed away half their verdicts. You came before. That's good. I wasn't even sure if this counted as abuse, I admitted. They keep saying they're worried about me, like they're doing me a favor. He nodded slowly. Worry is not a crime, but lying to medical professionals, manipulating reports, interfering with mail, and attempting to obtain guardianship over a competent adult for financial gain, those things can add up to something the courts take very seriously. It was strange hearing my family described in words like financial gain and courts. What do I do? I asked. He leaned forward. First, we shore up your defenses. Then, we build a nice little file of our own in case we ever need to go on offense. He explained it in terms even I could understand.
We would create a revocable living trust. I would move my house and certain accounts into it. I would be the sole trustee as long as I was able. When I couldn't be, I would decide who stepped in, not Daniel. We would revoke any old powers of attorney that might be floating around from when Leo died and I let Daniel handle everything. We would draft new documents with specific limits. We would make sure my bank knew that any login attempts from unknown devices should be flagged and that no one could get information without a password phrase only I knew.
And your sons in finance, he added, will also have a little chat on paper, about what happens when licensed professionals are involved in misleading the court in guardianship matters. There was that wolf-teeth smile Mrs. Washington had mentioned. The emotional part was harder. Sitting in that chair, signing papers about my own future incapacity, reading phrases like, "if I become unable to make or communicate responsible decisions," made my chest ache. It felt like writing a will for a woman my children already thought was half gone. That night, I pulled Leo's old flannel shirt out of the back of the closet and held it to my face, breathing in the faint, ghostly scent of his aftershave. "What would you have done?" I whispered into the fabric. I could almost hear him answer in my head. "You did the hard work of raising them. You can do the hard work of standing up to them, too." Lila became my right hand in all of it. "Make a folder called Maggie Defense," she said one afternoon, sitting at my kitchen table with her laptop while we scanned documents. "Password protect it. Use something they'd never guess." We scanned the cognitive test, the notebook pages, the screenshot, the recording, Mr. Alvarez's engagement letter. "Why that name?" I asked her, watching the progress bar creep across the screen. "Because you're under attack," she said simply. "You're allowed to defend yourself." There were close calls. Once, while I was on the phone with Mr. Alvarez, going over language in the trust documents, Kyla knocked on my front door. "Shoot," I whispered into the receiver. "She's here." "Hang up and call me back later," he said calmly. "Remember, he who talks most loses. With people like this, say less." I shoved the papers into a drawer, closed my notebook, and opened the door with what I hoped was an innocent smile. "Maggie!" Kyla said, stepping in without waiting to be invited. "I was just driving by and thought I'd check on you." She looked around, eyes sweeping over the table. I could almost feel her cataloging everything. "I was just doing a crossword," I lied. "Crosswords are good for your brain," she said, smiling. "You know, they have those at Oakwood every morning." Another time, Denise came over to help you declutter, Mom. "Studies show clutter increases fall risk," she said, repeating something Daniel must have told her. We went through my hall closet, my pantry, the little room where I kept craft supplies. When she reached for the drawer where I'd put my notebook, my heart lurched. "What's in here?" she asked. "Old birthday cards," I said quickly, sliding in front of it. "I'm not ready to throw those out yet." She hesitated, then moved on. When she went to the bathroom, I slipped the notebook into my bedroom and tucked it under my mattress like a teenager hiding a diary. I also started doing something I never thought I'd do. I recorded my own child. I learned how to set my phone face down on the table with the voice memo app running. It caught Daniel saying, "Once she's in, she can't just check herself out, right? There's a process." It caught Kyla telling Denise, "We'll make sure the place has a nice garden. She likes plants. She'll forget this house in 6 months." It caught Denise whispering to me once in the doorway, "If you play along, maybe it won't be so bad." I hated myself sometimes for pressing that red button, but then I'd remember the white sedan in my driveway and the clipboard in my living room, and my finger would tap it again. Mr. Alvarez told me we were building a record of pattern and intent. Those were his words. To me, it felt like stacking sandbags in front of a house you knew a flood was coming for. Finally, after weeks of paperwork and quiet panic, he said, "I think it's time to invite them in." I asked who, though I knew already. "Your children," he said. "To a meeting. We'll call it a family care plan discussion. They'll come expecting you to sign over control. Instead, we will clarify things." The thought of sitting across from Daniel and Kyla in a lawyer's office made my stomach twist. "They're going to be furious," I said. "Yes," he agreed mildly, "but they'll also hear in no uncertain terms what will happen if they keep pushing, and they'll hear it from someone who knows exactly which regulators to CC that evidence on if necessary." We picked a Saturday morning, less chance of rush hour traffic and excuses. The night before, I sat alone in my kitchen with a mug of chamomile tea between my hands. The trust document was in a neat folder beside me. My notebook was tucked into my purse.
The little speaker Mr. Alvarez had given me rested on the table like a coiled snake. I practiced what I wanted to say out loud, to no one. I love you. I know what you did. I will not let you do it again. The words felt foreign in my mouth. I wasn't a confrontational woman. I'd spent most of my life smoothing over rough edges, saying, "It's fine, don't worry about it," even when it wasn't fine, and I did worry. But there comes a point when being the peacemaker turns into being the doormat. I washed my mug, turned off the kitchen light, and stood for a moment in the dimness listening to the house. Tomorrow, I told the four walls, we draw a line.
Mr. Alvarez's office smelled like coffee and old paper that morning. The lobby radio played a soft oldie station. I was early, I always am. I sat in the waiting room, hands folded over my purse, listening to the clock tick on the wall. When the elevator dinged, my heart jolted. Daniel walked in first, in a crisp shirt with no tie, casual but not too casual. Kyla came behind him, and a blazer and jeans, holding a leather portfolio. Denise trailed in last, her shoulders hunched, eyes darting around. "Mom," Daniel said with a practiced smile, "you made it." It was such an odd thing to say, as if I were the one who had trouble showing up. "I did," I said. "Thank you for coming." He clapped a hand lightly on my shoulder. "We're just glad you finally agreed to talk to someone," he said. "This will make everything smoother for everyone." For everyone. Mr. Alvarez came out then, all professional warmth. "Good morning," he said, shaking hands. "I'm Raul Alvarez. Thank you for being here to discuss Ms. Lewis's estate planning and care preferences." I watched Kyla's shoulders relax at those words. Estate planning was a phrase that made people like her see dollar signs. We all sat around a conference table in a room with a window that looked out over the parking lot. There was a box of tissues in the center, just in case. Daniel cleared his throat. "So, I think we're all on the same page about why we're here," he began. Mr. Alvarez smiled politely. "I'd still appreciate hearing your understanding," he said. "It helps me serve the family better." "Well," Daniel said, glancing at Kyla and Denise, "Mom's been struggling to keep up with things, bills, safety, you know. We've been talking to her doctor. We've had some professionals weigh in. We think it's time to formalize some support. I can serve as financial guardian. Kyla can manage day-to-day logistics. Denise will support as needed. We're just trying to make sure Mom is safe." There it was again, that word. "I see," Mr. Alvarez said, jotting something on his legal pad. "When you say financial guardian, are you referring to a voluntary power of attorney or the involuntary guardianship petition you've already begun preparing?" Daniel blinked. Well, we talked to someone at a clinic. They said guardianship might be the clearest route." Kyla sat up straighter. "We're not trying to take anything from her," she cut in. "We're trying to protect her from herself and from scammers." "Of course," Mr. Alvarez said mildly. "I always like to ask, though, since there is a legal difference between someone voluntarily granting limited powers to a trusted agent and someone having their rights removed by the court." The word removed hung in the air. Denise shifted in her chair. "What we want is what's best for Mom," Daniel said a little too quickly. "And what your mother wants?" Mr. Alvarez asked, turning to me. "Have we heard that yet?" 3 pairs of eyes swung toward me. For a moment, all the air in the room seemed to disappear. I reached into my purse and pulled out the manila folder with Dr. Shaw's assessment. My fingers did not shake. "What I want," I said, "is for everyone in this room to stop pretending I don't know my own name." I slid the top paper across the table toward Mr. Alvarez. He flipped it open and, with my nod, turned it so my children could see. "This is Mrs. Lewis's recent cognitive assessment," he said, "administered by her primary care physician.
As you can see, she scored well within normal range for her age, with no clinical indication of dementia or other impairment. Here, he tapped the highlighted line, Dr. Shah notes that in her medical opinion, your mother is currently competent to manage her own affairs. Daniel's mouth tightened. Kyla's eyes narrowed. Denise brought a hand to her lips. I'm not saying she's stupid, Daniel said quickly. I'm saying she's overwhelmed. The house is too much. The bills. We'll get to the house and the bills, Mr. Alvarez said calmly. First, I want us all to be clear that there is, at present, no medical justification for stripping your mother of her legal autonomy. He let that sink in for a moment. Now, he continued, reaching into his own folder. As of 2 weeks ago, Mrs. Lewis executed a revocable living trust. He laid another document on the table. In simple terms, this means her house and certain assets are now held by the trust. She is the sole trustee while she is competent. She has designated backup trustees in the event of her incapacity. Those backup trustees do not include any of you. The room went very, very still. Kyla's mouth fell open. You did what? She demanded, turning to me. I made plans, I said, keeping my voice calm. My own plans, with my own lawyer. But, Mom, Daniel sputtered, we talked about me being on the house, just in case. You said you'd think about it. And I did, and I decided I want neutral people making decisions if I ever truly can't, not someone who's already tried to have me removed from my home. Denise let out a small sob, halfway between a sob and a gasp. We were trying to help you, she whispered. Mr. Alvarez cleared his throat. There's one more piece I'd like to share. With your mother's permission. I nodded. My pulse thudded in my ears. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small portable speaker. He set it on the table and plugged in his phone. You're recording us? Kyla snapped. Not today, he said evenly. This is a recording your niece made of a phone conversation. Listen. Daniel's voice filled the room.
Look, Jennifer, I know the tests sometimes don't show the real picture. Honestly, she's fine some days. But if we wait for her to actually decline, we'll never be able to do this. The house will be a nightmare to deal with if she dies without us on everything. I just want to make sure that if my mom tries to game the test, we can still move forward. She's very good at performing. She used to work in a school office. She knows how to talk to people. My son's live face went pale as his recorded voice kept talking. Kyla's cheeks flushed bright red. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. That's taken out of context, she said finally. It's taken out of your living room. You were folding laundry. Lila was in the hallway. Denise's eyes were brimming now. She said it was about her safety, she whispered to Daniel. You said you'd never do anything behind her back. I was trying to get help, he shot back, the polished advisor voice starting to crack. Do you want her wandering around until she falls and breaks a hip? Do you want to deal with this house when she dies without a will? She has a will, a new one, properly executed. With the trust, it should be quite straightforward, provided no one attempts to interfere with her estate through fraudulent guardianship petitions. He let the word fraudulent hang there. Daniel's jaw flexed. Are you accusing me of a crime? I'm pointing out, Mr. Alvarez replied, that knowingly exaggerating or falsifying symptoms to medical personnel in order to obtain legal control over an adult's finances can be construed as financial elder abuse. That's a term regulators and licensing boards are very interested in, especially when the individual involved is a financial advisor. Kyla's head snapped toward Daniel. Your license! She blurted. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint whoosh of the building's air system. I reached into my purse and pulled out my spiral notebook. It looked so small and ordinary there on that big table. I've been writing things down. Dates. Things you've said. The day the clinic car was in my driveway. The day you moved my bills. The day you tried to get my doctor to sign papers about me without me present. I slid a copy of a few pages across the table, the ink a little smeared in spots where my hand had shaken. I sat in a motel room alone that night, while strangers walked through my living room, taking notes about a woman they'd never met, and my own children told them I was confused, that I might be crazy. My eyes stung, but I didn't let the tears fall. I continued. If I ever need help, real help, the kind where I can't remember my own address or how to make tea, I will ask for it. I will sign whatever needs to be signed while I still can. Until then, you do not get to take my keys, my house, or my name and hand them to a court like a petition. Denise broke then. She put her face in her hands and sobbed. I didn't know it was this bad, she cried. Daniel said you were... He said if we waited, it'd be too late. He said the state would come in, and... So he scared you too, I said softly. I'm sorry, baby. I'm sorry he put that on you. Daniel pushed back his chair. I was trying to keep this from becoming a mess. I was trying to get ahead of a crisis. The crisis, Mr. Alvarez said calmly, is that your mother is sitting here with clear evidence that her own son attempted to weaponize the medical and legal system against her. She has brought that evidence to me. I have documented it. I have advised her of her rights, and I will continue to advise her. He folded his hands on the table. At Mrs. Lewis's request, we have not yet filed any formal complaints with state elder services, the medical board, or the financial regulatory bodies that oversee your license. Yet. The last word landed with a thud. I'm not here to send my son to prison. I'm here to draw a line. I looked at each of them in turn. If you love me, you will stop this. No more calls to doctors behind my back. No more surprise visits with crisis teams in my living room. No more guardianship talk. If you try again, Mr. Alvarez will send everything we have to the people who can make your life very complicated. Do you understand? Daniel stared at the table. His jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jump. Do you understand? I repeated. He swallowed. Yes, he said hoarsely. Kyla opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, then caught sight of the assessment paper, the trust document, the little speaker. The fight went out of her shoulders. Yes, she said finally. I'm sorry, Mom, she whispered. I should have trusted you more than I trusted him. I reached across the table and took her hand. We'll figure us out later, I said softly. Right now, I just need you to stop standing on his side of this line. The meeting ended not with a slam, but with a quiet unraveling. Daniel left first, his portfolio clutched a little too tightly. Kyla followed, her phone already in her hand, thumbs flying. Denise stayed a little longer, hugging me in the hallway, her tears soaking into my shoulder. When they were gone, I sat back down at the conference table. My knees ached. My heart ached more. You did well, Mr. Alvarez said. I feel like I've just buried something, I admitted. Sometimes you have to bury the fantasy of the family you thought you had, he said gently, to save the person you are right now. In the weeks that followed, there were no more surprise cars in my driveway, no more clinic clipboards in my living room. Mr. Alvarez sent Daniel and Kyla a letter, polite and firm, summarizing the meeting. He laid out the legal status of the trust, the cognitive assessment, and the evidence of their prior actions. He spelled out, in very clear language, what would happen if anyone attempted to pursue guardianship again without new and legitimate cause. A copy went to Dr. Shaw. Another, he told me, went into a file he kept labeled with my name. Daniel called me once after that. His voice was stiff. I hope you're happy, he said. I'm safer. Happiness is extra. You've pitted me against regulators and lawyers. Do you have any idea what that could do to my career? Do you have any idea what it would have done to my life if you'd succeeded? I asked quietly. He didn't answer. We exchanged a few brittle words about the grandkids' schedules and hung up. After that, he stopped dropping by unannounced. He stopped logging into my accounts. If he spoke about me to colleagues or friends, I never heard it, but Mrs. Washington did mention one afternoon over her fence that she'd heard through the grapevine that boy of yours got himself into a bit of a whisper situation at work. Whisper situation? I repeated. Folks talk at lunch about some complaint that almost got filed, then didn't, but might still. That kind of thing has a way of hanging around. Kyla's social media changed too. She had once posted vision boards with big kitchens and captioned them, "Manifesting our forever home." She shared articles about creative ways to leverage family real estate. After the meeting, her posts turned into vague quotes about toxic relatives and protecting your peace. Pictures were taken in a smaller rental. The shiny new SUV was gone, replaced by a modest sedan. I didn't like any of it. I just watched from my little corner of the internet, sipping my tea. Denise did what Denise always does when she's hurt. She worked more. She took extra shifts. She met with a budget counselor Mr. Alvarez recommended. One afternoon, she came over with a folder of her own. "I opened my own account for Leela's college," she said, setting it on the table. "Not the one Daniel set up. I'm going to fund it myself. Slowly, but myself." I looked at her and saw a woman trying very hard to step out of her brother's shadow. "I'm proud of you," I said. She started seeing a therapist too. She told me that on a rainy Tuesday, twisting a napkin in her hands at my kitchen table. "I told her I almost let you put you away somewhere because I was scared of money." She said that was a lot of weight for a middle child to carry. "You've been carrying everyone for a long time. It's okay to set some of us down." Leela, my brave girl, met with a woman from the State Elder Services Office one day after school. Mr. Alvarez arranged it. They sat in my living room with cups of cocoa while the woman asked gentle questions and took careful notes. "I told her everything," she said afterwards, flopping onto the couch in relief. "About the chat, about the recording, about the plans. She said what you went through has a name." "What name?" I asked. She said, "financial elder abuse, even if it never finished happening." Dr. Shaw updated my chart too. She added a note about family dynamics and patients' clear wishes regarding autonomy. She marked my file so that any future calls from relatives would be documented and redirected through me. "I can't control what they say," she told me at my next visit, "but I can control how we respond." There was no dramatic courtroom scene in my story. No judge slamming a gavel, screaming headlines, or orange jumpsuits. What there was quieter. A son who realized his license and livelihood were hanging over a pit his own greed had dug. A daughter-in-law who had to learn to live within the walls she could actually afford, not the one she hoped to finance with her mother-in-law's house. A daughter who slowly stepped out of a pattern of obedience and started to make choices she could live with when she looked at herself in the mirror. And a mother who changed the locks on her front door and on her own heart. That last part hurt the most. Months later, on a soft golden afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table with the late sun slanting across the lemon-scented wood. The house smelled like baking bread. The new lock Mr. Alvarez insisted I install clicked softly every time the door closed. On the counter, a small fireproof box sat tucked under the cabinet. Inside were my trust documents, my will, the cognitive assessment, a flash drive with every recording and screenshot, and the business card of one Raul Alvarez. Lila came over after school with dirt under her fingernails and a packet of herb seeds in her backpack. "Let's make you a little garden, Grandma," she said, "on the windowsill, so you can have basil without buying those sad little grocery store clamshells." We lined up ceramic mugs and old jars on the sill. We filled them with soil that spilled onto the counter and the floor. We laughed when we made a mess. She talked about college brochures and an essay she wanted to write. "About what?" I asked, pressing tiny seeds into the damp dirt. "About protecting the people who protected you," she said simply. The words settled into me like warm bread. My life didn't become a fairy tale after that. I still had bills. My knees still hurt when it rained. Sometimes I'd wake up at 3 in the morning with my heart pounding, sure I'd hear a knock and find a clipboarded stranger on my porch. But my days had a quiet rhythm again. I joined a book club at the library. We argued about plots and character and whether the twist in Chapter 5 had really been earned. I walked with Mrs. Washington around the block in the evenings, our canes tapping in counterpoint. We complained about the price of eggs and praised the Lord that our lights turned on when we flipped the switch. Every now and then I'd text Dr. Shaw a photo of my blood pressure log. She'd send back a thumbs up emoji, and I'd smiled at how modern we both were being. Occasionally, a holiday would roll around and my phone would ping with a message from Daniel or Kyla. "Merry Christmas, Mom." "Happy birthday, Maggie. Kids say hi." Sometimes they'd attach a photo of the grandkids at a recital or a soccer game. I'd look at their growing faces and feel that familiar tug in my chest. I always answered. Short, civil sentences. "Thank you. Wishing you all well." I did not invite them over. I did not send pictures of my herb garden. Some boundaries have to stay solid to hold. With Denise, it was different. We started small. Coffee dates at a neutral cafe halfway between our houses. We talked about her patience, her back pain, the funny things Lila said. We carefully did not talk about guardianship, Dr. Shaw, or what had almost happened. Sometimes she cried. Sometimes I did. But each conversation felt a little less like walking through a minefield and a little more like two women trying to build a bridge from both ends. One evening, months after that meeting at Mr. Alvarez's office, I sat on my small back porch with a cup of tea. The sky was streaked with pink and orange. The hum of traffic from the main road was a soft, distant thing. The herbs on the windowsill inside were growing. Basil, thyme, parsley, each one reaching toward the light like they believed it would always be there. I thought about how close I had come to being erased from my own life while still breathing, to having other people's words overwrite mine in some official file. I looked at my hands, lined and strong. I thought about all the women like me, out there, washing dishes and watching grandchildren, whose names were written underneath someone else's plans. And I thought about the night in that motel when I whispered to a humming air conditioner, "You will not bury me alive," without knowing exactly how I was going to keep that promise.
I sipped my tea and smiled to myself. If you're listening to this story while you fold laundry or stir a pot on your own stove, I want you to hear me the way I heard Dr. Shaw that day, clear and steady. When the people you raised start planning your life without asking if you're still in it, remember there's nothing unloving about locking the doors and keeping the keys in your own hands.